Fox News Alert Now. Immigration back in the hot seat in a significant way. A federal judge threatens to hold leading members of the Trump team in contempt. It's Friday. I'm Bill Hammer, live at America's Newsroom. Big welcome back to you, Julie.
Good to see you on a Friday. I'm Julie Banderas in for Sandra Smith this morning. Well, the family members were in the middle of appealing the removal from the U.S. when they were put on a plane to El Salvador. The judge ordering the Justice Department to bring them back, saying, quote, "This is pretty outrageous that someone seeking justice in the U.S. court is spirited away while her attorneys are arguing for justice for her." Doug McElway picks up the story live from Washington. So, Doug, what's the background here?
Well, Julie, the background here is best summed up by this segment of Judge Emmett Sullivan's court order that I'm about to read to you. It really sums up his outrage at the deportation of a woman known only as Carmen. It reads, and I quote here, "It is hereby ordered that the defendant shall return Carmen and her daughter to the United States forthwith, and it is further ordered that in the event that the defendants do not fully comply with this order, they shall be ordered to appear in court to show cause why they should not be held in contempt of court." The defendants are Attorney General Jeff Sessions, DHS Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen, as well as two senior executives with the Immigration Service. The plane that took Carmen and her daughter back to El Salvador, where the two were fearful of threats from gang members, did apparently turn around. The Department of Homeland Security told us, and I quote, "In compliance with the court's order upon arrival in El Salvador, the plaintiffs did not disembark and were promptly returned to the United States." The Department of Justice declined to comment to Fox News. Jennifer Chang Newell with the ACLU's Immigration Rights Project said in a statement that the administration's actions were putting immigrants in grave danger. Quote, "In its rush to deport as many immigrants as possible, the Trump administration is putting these women and children in grave danger of being raped, beaten, or killed," her statement read. And she added that we are thrilled the stay of removal was issued, but sickened that the government deported two of our clients, a mom and a little girl, in the early morning hours. We will not rest until our clients are returned to safety. That's where it stands right now. Julie, obviously, to be continued at this point.
Okay. Doug McElway, we'll be watching it. Thank you.
Significant way, too. Byron York here to analyze, size it all up. Byron, good morning to you in Washington. I think
Bill.
This touches on a central issue. On what basis should you receive asylum in the U.S.?
Well, obviously the judge's anger was not over deportation per se, but over the administration acting before the court had ruled. So that's a clear issue. But it does touch a much bigger question about asylum and the current debate over asylum. In the past, people from outside the United States could be granted asylum in the United States if they could show that they were the targets of government persecution in their home countries over their race or their religion or their political beliefs. In recent years, we have granted asylum to people who show that they have a fear of violence, generalized violence in their home countries, be it gang-related or just a high murder rate, or people who are actually just in bad marriages who fear domestic violence. Maybe they have an abusive spouse. So what Jeff Sessions and the rest of the Trump administration are trying to do is to restrict the definition of asylum to more of the old sense of government persecution.
So they're trying to take it back to the older definition, which would be a big change from what we've seen in years.
It would be, and in this particular case of Carmen, the ACLU does argue that she not only fears gang violence in her country, but is in an abusive marriage and fears domestic violence from her spouse.
But in this case, the court had not yet been settled, and that's what ticked off the judge.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's the big thing. I mean, this was in court. There had been an agreement that if the deportation was upheld, that Carmen and the daughter would be deported at some particular time, and the administration appears to have jumped the gun. So it's hard to imagine anything that would irritate a judge more than doing something like that.
That could be. You're 90 days away from a midterm. I mean, it could be, in certain parts of the country, a big and sizable political issue, Byron. How do you see that?
Well, it depends on how it plays out in each particular place. If the issue, immigration issue, is border security, that works out pretty well for Republicans, solid support for border security measures. On the other hand, if it focuses on family separation, we know that there was widespread, big majority opposition to the Trump administration's family separation policy. By the way, these, in the case of Carmen, the family was not separated. The mother and the daughter were deported together. But if it focuses on family separation, that's an issue that's going to put a lot of Republicans on the defensive.
It's a big part of this administration. Thank you so much, Byron York. We'll see how this plays out. You bet. Have a great weekend.
Fox News alert now. North Korea slamming the U.S., saying the White House is not living up to the agreement reached at June's Singapore summit. And now Pyongyang says that could have a major impact on how quickly it tears down its nuclear missile program. Kevin Cork live at the White House. Quickly is an odd word to use, right? Because this couldn't possibly go any slower. Kevin, what can you tell us?
Yeah, no question about that, Julie. Listen, this is a circumstance from the administration's perspective where they understand you're going to get some pushback. In fact, they prepare for it. And if I could use the old example of sticks and carrots, understand this from the administration's perspective, the sticks would be like sanctions. The sticks would be things like, threats, quite frankly. But then the carrots are things like diplomacy and relief. Well, North Korean officials, frankly, have suggested that the tone struck by President Trump is one of aspiration and cooperation and possibility. But what they're doing now is they're criticizing the more fact-based, hard numbers approach by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and National Security Advisor John Bolton. They feel like the conversation with those gentlemen has been far less constructive. In fact, the North has previously described senior U.S. officials as being, quote, gangster-like in their approach to trying to work something out with respect to denuclearization. But White House officials tell me as early as this morning that, listen, Kevin, this is all part of the idea of the hard work that it takes to get toward denuclearization. By the way, that work continues up to this very moment. And in fact, it could ramp up, Julie, as the two sides perhaps get an opportunity to meet again. Julie?
All right, want to switch gears now, Kevin, to another topic, and that's the president talking about the violence in Chicago yesterday.
Yeah, you know, this is one of those circumstances, such a lovely city. You have to wonder, at what point do you accept federal help? In fact, White House officials have suggested the president has made a standing offer for assistance, but in what form and just how that would play out in reality is a sticking point. And for the city, while help is obviously needed, there is a political element to this story, Julie, and that could be a major sticking point. Understand that former Obama administration official Rahm Emanuel is the mayor in Chicago. He's rejected calls for federal help, criticizing the president and his administration's approach on a host of issues. And it's a very difficult circumstance for him. And that could be the problem for Chicagoans. Unfortunately, what that means, Julie, is they are literally and figuratively caught in the crossfire. Julie?
All right, Kevin Cork, thank you.
Also, this fresh to us a few moments ago. President Trump firing off of the NFL today after members of several teams last night in the preseason game number 1, including the Miami Dolphins, protest the national anthem during the respective preseason games. Some players raising their fist, others took a knee. The president tweeting this a short time ago. Here we are. A football game that fans are paying so much money to watch and enjoy is no place to protest. Most of that money goes to the players anyway. Find another way to protest. Stand proudly for your national anthem. May be suspended without pay. Well, right now, the league's national anthem policy is on hold amid ongoing talks with the players' union. So this issue is back here on the field and in conversation as well. Some of these players also, they chose, a handful of them, to stay in the locker room during the national anthem. And as they continue these negotiations with the players' union, and different team owners have taken different positions on it as well. Maybe that's the compromise. So some elected to stay in the locker room last night, but the president's going to stay on this issue. We're going to see how it plays out.
Some are also saying that that's also another form of protest.
No question about it.
So by them not being out there with their field and being team members, it's a team.
Jerry Jones from the Dallas Cowboys has been adamant that he wants all his players on the field standing on the line, hand over heart, and some other owners have followed suit on that. But when you get into politics and you get into social statements during these NFL games, we're going to debate this now for the next 6 months. Just like we did last year.
I mean, another 6 months. Exactly. It doesn't end. All right. Fox News alert. More people forced out of their homes in California as the deadly wildfires there continue to grow. Smoke from the flames now covering 3 3/4 of the entire state. And now there actually may be an arrest in one of those fires.
Also, the Trump team saying it wants a Space Force by 2020, 2 years from now. But what will it look like? We'll talk to the head of NASA today, our guest in 30 minutes. Julie?
And in the wake of Tuesday's primaries, Republicans continuing to Nancy Pelosi. Will the House Minority Leader be a liability for Democrats in November? We're going to ask former Utah Congressman Jason Chaffetz.
Not one Democrat voted to cut your taxes. And the other day, Nancy Pelosi said, we have to raise your taxes. What's that all about?
A Fox News alert, Kansas Secretary of State Chris Kobach recusing himself from the vote counting process in his tight Republican gubernatorial primary race with Governor Jeff Colyer. Currently, Kobach holds a narrow lead with 121 votes after 2 counties reported discrepancies in their initial tallies. This as Colyer accuses Kobach of giving county election officials wrong information on how to handle uncounted ballots. We're going to ask the governor about all of this when he joins us in our 11 o'clock hour.
If you want to stop the radical Pelosi and Maxine Waters agenda, there's only one choice in this election. That's vote for Troy Balderson.
From Ohio, earlier in the week, President Trump and Republicans looking to make Nancy Pelosi a political liability for Democrats heading into midterms. This is Democrat support for her appears to be slipping among some House members. Listen.
When you are elected formally in November, you will have a vote as part of the Democratic caucus as to who will be the next Democratic leader, whether it be the minority leader or the Speaker of the House. Will you vote for Nancy Pelosi?
Probably not.
Probably not.
That's my answer. No, probably not.
That's close as we get. Jason Chaffetz, former Utah Congressman, Fox News contributor. How you doing, sir? And good morning to you. I'll quote another Democrat, Brian Higgins from New York. People pretend it is not a problem, but it's a problem that exists. How significant of a problem? What is the liability politically here, Jason?
Well, what Brian Higgins is talking about is absolutely right. There are a lot of Democrats that are grumbling. Nancy Pelosi should have exited the stage probably at the time Barack Obama did, but they all thought that Hillary Clinton was going to be the president, which didn't turn out to be true. And now she is the #1 albatross around the Democrats' necks. The only reason she's still there is more than any other politician in the history of the United States. She has raised more money than anybody in the history of our nation. But other than that, she doesn't bring any positive to the Democratic ticket.
She raises the cash. Drew Hamill pushing back. He is Pelosi's spokesperson. Says at the end of the day, the midterms are about the president and his party. Yet you have 27 House Democrats who have either not endorsed her or not outright said, yes, they will vote for her, Jason.
The only problem with this statement is the very first vote that you have in Congress is who are you going to vote for Speaker of the House? And it's a very legitimate question that Democrats don't want to answer. And when she is out there telling people essentially that she wants to raise their taxes, she hasn't publicly said she wants to abolish ICE, but she hasn't shot that down either. We know that they want to impeach the president. This is hardly a positive message that will gravitate the people that are truly in the middle, that will make this election sway one direction or another. That is not a positive economic message, in contrast to what Donald Trump and the Republicans are offering.
Let me come back to that point in a moment. Ocasio-Cortez, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez here from New York. She was on CNN 2 nights ago. She, too, did not go far enough with Pelosi. Her answer when asked about it.
I don't think that there's any one head. You know, we are a collective. This is a movement, and I don't think parties are ever about one person, but they're about how the contributions that each one person gives to the party. So I think that there are really exciting folks in the party, certainly folks that I look forward to working with. And, I don't think that it's about there being a party being about one person.
That's pretty good dodge right there. Whether it's her or others.
Yeah, we call that waffle. We call that waffling.
I guess Scott and some other covered. You're right on that. You mentioned taxes in ICE abolishment and impeachment. That might motivate a lot of people on the left. But what does it do again for the middle in early November that you just mentioned there?
Well, contrast it to the revolution that really happened with Newt Gingrich. He was an ideological and organizational change, a fundamental new contract with America. And if you're in the middle and you're really wondering which direction should I go, what are the Democrats offering you other than a step backwards, higher taxes? It's just not a winning formula. It's not a positive economic or hopeful message that is out there. And I think with the president's success on the economy, on foreign policy, these are all things that are moving in the right direction. Donald Trump would not be the president of the United States if he didn't get union votes and he didn't get true independence. Those went to Donald Trump in the mass.
Address this. Carl Rove's got a piece in the Wall Street Journal. It's called "The Blue Wave May Be Receding." I don't know what you think about that right now. Blue wave, red wave. Ohio was a bit of a stunner the other night. It looks like the Republican will hold that seat. But they had only 100,000 Democrats vote. I say only because they were thinking the margins would be higher than that. And when you consider the Republican turnout in the California primaries and the Ohio primaries earlier than that, November's all about turnout. And Republicans have an uphill battle come November. But how do you see right now this anecdotal evidence coming in from this past Tuesday and previous primaries as to how you make a guess as to whether or not Republicans hold the House or lose it to Nancy Pelosi?
A congressional district is made up of about 800,000 people. So if the Democrats are getting less than 100,000 people out to vote in a pivotal race where they're putting every bit of effort into it, that spells a bit of trouble. It's certainly not this big wave that happened in 2010. I was elected same time as Barack Obama. We sat there in 2010 and there were 63 seats that flowed into the Republican hands. Certainly, Republicans will lose some races. Historically, that always happens in a non-presidential election year to the party that's in the minority. But, Bill, there is no evidence to suggest when the president goes 5 for 5 in his selections and puts the emphasis out there, there is no evidence to suggest that there's some big tsunami that's going to flow the Democrats' way.
This is going to be debated heavily over the next 3 months, as you well know. Just a little bit this way or that way could swing it. Jason, thank you so much for being with us today. Jason Chaffetz there in Utah today. Thanks. Really was next.
We got scary new video, Bill, showing 2 teenagers getting struck by lightning. We're going to tell you how they are doing.
Also in a moment, a new theory on the disappearance of Molly Tibbetts. Where is this University of Iowa student? Why police now say they may now know what happened to Molly.
We all stick together. We're all part of, one big group of people that knows everybody. So somebody to go missing like this and disappear off the face of the earth with no trace, basically, this is a shock.
Stable condition after they were struck by lightning near Phoenix, Arizona. Whoa, check that out. The 2 were walking through a park during a monsoon. Security footage capturing the moment they were hit. The boys currently in intensive care, said to be improving. We certainly hope the best for that. That is something else. You don't see it every day, captured on camera out there in Phoenix, Arizona.
No,
so
certainly
good luck
not.
to the boys and their families who are
And a warning to young people and older people that you don't go out in a storm. If they say stay indoors, stay indoors. Lightning is dangerous. All right. Police in Iowa canceling their scheduled update on the search for a missing college student, Molly Tibbetts, for the 2nd time. The question is why? Well, they know something. The 20-year-old was last seen June 18th after going for a nighttime run, and now a former FBI profiler is offering Fox News a new theory on her disappearance. Matt Finn is live in Brooklyn, Iowa, with more on the investigation. Hey, Matt.
Julie, this morning, the lead agency in this investigation tells Fox News that they canceled the past 2 press conferences, including the one scheduled for today, because they just did not have anything to offer the public. However, they tell us that they do have some type of information they're going to give us on Monday. Exactly what that is not clear. Now, that FBI profiler you mentioned and Molly's family and her boyfriend are all running with the theory that they believe that Molly got into the car with someone and that something horrible happened after that. She got into the car with someone she knows. However, we spoke to a neighbor on this street who says he might have been one of the last people to see Molly jogging on this very street when she went missing. And we want to point out that this is a very short distance between Interstate 80 behind me and Highway 6. And during our time here, we have seen a lot of trucks getting on and off the highway, a lot of cars getting on and off the highway. So there is also the possibility that a stranger got off one of those roads and ended up here in town. So far, investigators have not revealed if Molly was abducted or went disappearing out on her jog, or if she made it back into her boyfriend's house where she was staying when she went missing. However, now the boyfriend is now clarifying to Fox News, or telling us, that there was no signs of struggle in that house where she was staying. For weeks, he would not clarify to us about a sign of struggle. Perhaps investigators were asking him not to comment about that, but now he's saying no signs of struggle in that house, and he's also pointing out that Molly's iPhone, her Fitbit, and the armband that she jogged with are all missing, perhaps indicating that she did indeed go disappear or was abducted while out on that jog. You know, I talked to a federal investigator in this case. He says that so far they have, quote, questioned everyone in this county, and that they are taking all leads seriously. Here on the ground, one bit of activity we have seen is the FBI repeatedly question a pig farmer who lives nearby. I spoke to that farmer. He says that he did take a polygraph and that he was asked about Molly Tibbetts during that lie detector test. And that's a piece of new information, because we've been talking to him for a while now, and he is very open with us, but when we asked him what he's being questioned about, he would not tell us. Now he does reveal that during the polygraph, he was asked about Molly Tibbetts. He insists he has nothing to do with her disappearance. So far this morning, no suspects and no arrests in this case. Julie.
All right, thank you very much. You know, it is interesting that they have canceled a couple of these news conferences. Yes. You got to read between the lines there.
You know, last week, and you wonder what it means. You know, are they on to something? Are they trying to squeeze somebody? Are they watching somebody very closely? You hope so. Or do they have a lack of information? I think normally in cases like this in the past, they would still hold the news conference and put the word out there. So it's tough to know. Everybody's got their own theories right now, but Molly has not shown up.
They don't want to come forward with a news conference and have no information, because then a lot of people scratch their heads and say, why bother?
Yeah, and if I were the sheriff, I'd want to keep putting out that number, keep giving us tips, and, you know, make sure that she is front and center in the headlines. So, look, authorities are trying their best out there in Iowa. It has captured the attention of that state and the country, so we need to get her home somehow. In a moment here, growing tensions between the U.S. and Russia. Moscow accusing the U.S. of economic war. This over the brand new sanctions. Now Russia firing back with a new threat of its own. This is going back and forth, folks, between Putin and Washington. Details on that coming up in a moment.
And new evacuations in California as those deadly wildfires continue to grow. This, as we learn, the majority of the state is now shrouded in smoke.
It is a nightmare. It's so horrible. I just want this to be over. Never will think it's gonna burn like that.
So we have you. 9:31 now. Fox News alert now. Those deadly wildfires raging in the West. More people ordered out of their homes in Southern California now, as authorities say smoke from the fires is spreading across 3/4 of that state. One man now charged with arson for starting the so-called holy fire. Jonathan Hunt back on that story on the ground very close to that fire with more. Jonathan, good morning.
Good morning to you, Bill. The holy fire keeps spreading. It is above 10,000 acres right now. That was the last update we got late last night. New figures will be out in the next hour or so, and we expect it to have grown once again considerably. Take a look at two faces of the fire here. Over this side of this residential street, that is what firefighters call a controlled burn. They are burning away vegetation on the ground there so that they can control where the fire goes if it comes down these hills. And then we come back across this side of the street and you look up into the hills. This is the Cleveland National Forest there, and you can see the flames there. That is uncontrolled burn. That is starting to creep down the side of the hills here. That is the great concern. And last night, if you take a look at some of our nighttime video, those flames started coming rushing down these kind of hillsides in this area, which is about 60 miles east of Los Angeles. It is a great concern. 20,000 people so far have been evacuated from this area as a result of the holy fire. It is obviously a very scary time for any residents anywhere near these flames. Listen here.
It is a nightmare. It's so horrible. I just want this to be over. Never will think it's gonna burn like that. Wind, smoke, everything together. There's no place to go for me, but we'll figure something out.
Now, 51-year-old Forrest Clark has been charged with starting this fire. He was due in court yesterday, but actually refused to leave his cell. So that court appearance didn't happen. Not clear when his next scheduled court appearance will be. He was filmed, by the way, after this fire had started near his cabin up in the woods, shouting at firefighters, accusing them of stealing money from his property. He faces, by the way, 10 years to life in prison if he is found guilty on charges of starting this fire. But it is a big concern here, Bill. And as you take a look across again at this controlled burn going on here, firefighters really in a race against time to get this under control. Weather conditions pretty good right now, but we are expecting blustery winds to come up again this afternoon. And the winds and these kind of canyons that you've seen behind us, that is the perfect storm for these fires to grow. That is why in the next few hours they really want to get a handle on this. Otherwise, a lot of these homes around us now could be in very real danger, Bill.
We'll watch it along with you. Thank you. Southeast of L.A., Jonathan Hunt on the scene there. Thanks.
Russia vowing to retaliate over new U.S. sanctions, comparing the penalties to, quote, economic war. The State Department announcing the sanctions Wednesday in response to the poisoning of former Russian spy and his daughter in the UK. The Russian Prime Minister saying, and I'm quoting, it would be necessary if it would be needed to react to this war economically, politically, or if needed by other means, and our American friends need to understand this. Let's bring in Mary Kissel, editorial board member at the Wall Street Journal and a Fox News contributor. What does Russia's Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev mean when he means by taking other means? He's threatening something.
Yeah, well, Russia likes to threaten, and Russia likes to bluff, Julie. You saw after Turkey shot down a Russian plane over Syria, Russia threatened Turkey, and yet they backed down. You saw Russia threaten the United States after the U.S. military killed several hundred Russian mercenaries in Syria, and they did nothing. So Russia likes to talk big but do very little. That being said, they do have some avenues where they could make trouble for us.
Russia's scared. I mean, they know U.S. sanctions work. That's why they're reacting the way they are.
Well, yes, that's true. And, you know, President Trump was right to reimpose sanctions after the Skripal poisoning. I mean, let's think about what happened here. Moscow, or one of its agents, deployed a nerve agent on British soil, accidentally killing a British citizen, sickening several people, and it could have sickened several hundred more. The way that this was done was very nerve-wracking, and there need to be consequences for this kind of action.
All right. So, what are the consequences? U.S. sanctions. Okay. First of all, Vladimir Putin denies not only the Skripal, poisoning, but all the numbers of other chemical poisonings that he is allegedly responsible for appointing. None of which he will ever admit to. So, if you don't have a president that's ever going to admit to any wrongdoing whatsoever, how then do you get him to drop his chemical weapons?
The key is unity in the Western alliance. And what happened after the Skripal poisoning is that the United Kingdom, France, the United States, and other allies unilaterally kicked out lots of Russian spies. That's great. That's a good gesture. But that doesn't really hurt Putin and his cronies, who, let's be honest, are effectively running a criminal empire. That's who he is. He's a thug and a criminal. And so by taking this measure, which was entirely appropriate, the Trump administration said, we have a law in the books. When we determine chemical weapons are used, we have to take certain actions under the law. And that's what's been done.
You know, it's interesting, after the summit, the president got a lot of heat from those who felt like he was soft on Vladimir Putin when it came to his Russian meddling. But in fact, his tactic was quite the opposite, because here we are months later, and we are talking sanctions here. The president has a tactic he used in order to sit down and speak with Vladimir Putin, but with no uncertain terms, lay down the law. And
well, he's also getting a lot of pressure from Congress to do that. There are several bills now moving through the Senate. Chris Van Hollen, Marco Rubio's Deter Act. Lindsey Graham and Bob Menendez have another bigger catch-all bill here. So the Congress is concerned, and they're forcing the Trump administration, I think, to take harder measures. I mean, they're talking about mandatory sanctions on energy, on finance, on banking, on sovereign debt in Russia. Now, I think that's going to be watered down, but that's coming down the track, and I think the White House is starting to realize that they're going to have to work with Congress to shape something that they can both live with.
90 days. What happens in 90 days?
In the House?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a tough road. If we want to go to U.S. politics, look, people vote with their wallets, but they also, I think the Republicans have to take credit for what they've done. And I think Trump, by coming in to these local races, is nationalizing the race. And that's a risk. He succeeded in some places, in Georgia and Ohio, but he's failed in others, in Pennsylvania, for instance. So, look, if you want this agenda to continue, if you want a stronger foreign policy, if you want economic prosperity, you better hope they win.
What does the United States then? What does the Trump administration need to see from Russia in order not to impose a second round of sanctions in 90 days? I mean, already the stocks have been going down. The ruble is taking a huge hit. Russia is already feeling the pinch.
Yeah, well, look, the president is constrained by U.S. law.
Right.
And under U.S. law, several things have to happen for the president to be able to waive those second set of sanctions, including on-site inspections, for instance. Do we think Russia is going to allow UN inspectors or U.S. inspectors to go in?
The same could be said
I don't
for
think that's going to happen.
You know, how do we trust these countries? They cannot be trusted.
These countries,
without UN inspectors, weapons inspectors in there, they can never be trusted.
Well, I don't always think we can trust UN weapons inspectors. I think we need U.S. weapons inspectors in there. But look, these guys are thugs, and we have to exact consequences for their actions. That is the only thing that they understand. If they behave better, then we can pull off some of this pressure. But until that happens, he needs to keep the pressure on.
There needs to be accountability, and this president is doing so. All right, Mary Kissel, great to see you as always. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Bill.
20 minutes before the hour, former Ohio State University wrestler now changing his story about the Congressman Jim Jordan from Ohio. Mark Coleman had been quoted in the Wall Street Journal saying that Jordan must have known about sexual abuse by the team's doctor when he was an assistant coach in the 1980s and 1990s in Columbus, Ohio. Now Coleman releasing a statement saying that those comments were attributed to him that were not accurate or were misconstrued by media outlets. End quote. An update on that.
All right. The NFL preseason getting into full swing last night, and there were already protests during the national anthem. President Trump, though, now firing back. We'll have a live report coming up.
Also, the Vice President Mike Pence laying out plans for a Space Force 2 years from now. So what will it look like? NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine is our guest to lay it all out. Coming up live next.
As President Trump has said in his words, it is not enough to merely have an American presence in space. We must have American dominance in space, and so we will.
Breaking news out of Canada. Police in the town of Fredericton now apparently saying 2 of the 4 victims found shot to death early this morning were police officers. Authorities say a suspect is in custody. They're not giving out much more information than that. Police are saying the area is being blocked off for the, quote, foreseeable future. Fredericton lies about 100 miles east of Maine. We'll continue to bring you any updates as this story develops.
America will always seek peace in space as on the earth, but history proves that peace only comes through strength. And in the realm of outer space, the United States Space Force will be that strength in the years ahead.
As the Vice President Mike Pence laying out the vision yesterday on our program for the President's Space Force said to be installed by 2020. If approved, it would establish the first new military branch in 70 years. Now the question is whether or not the plan is practical. What does it look like? NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine is here to answer some questions. Jim, it's great to see you. Good morning to you, and thank you for your time. This is going to happen in 2 years or 20 years, but it's bound to happen eventually. Can you just give us an idea what the vision is on Space Force?
Absolutely. So when you think about the United States economy, we are dependent on space. The way we navigate, the way we communicate. In fact, a lot of your viewers are watching this probably on DirecTV or Dish Network. Maybe they're receiving it on the internet, maybe broadband from space. The way we produce food in this country, the way we produce energy in this country In fact, weather prediction, understanding of the climate, national security and defense, of course, disaster relief. All of these things are dependent on space. And one thing that I think maybe a lot of Americans are not familiar with is how dependent we are on the GPS signal specifically for timing. Every banking transaction in this country requires a timing signal from GPS. The power grid in this country requires a timing signal from GPS for the flow of electricity. It regulates the flow of electricity. So these kind of things are, and in fact, cell towers.
We have come to coexist together in that sense. But when you know, a former legislator from the state of Oklahoma, right, Republican.
Yes.
When and you've been on this topic, you voted for 3 times when you're a member of Congress, so you've been thinking about this for a long time. I can remember 15 years ago being in Kandahar, Afghanistan, thinking about the GPS technology that's now used to make our missiles more accurate than they ever were before. Now we're 15 years removed from that. So when you envision a space force, Jim, is it more human-based in space, or is it more technology?
Oh, it's more technology by far. So as the NASA administrator, you know, we have hundreds of billions of dollars worth of assets in space, and we have humans on the International Space Station. We don't do national security and defense, but we do care about space security. And when I was a member of Congress, as you said, I voted on this 3 times. And in fact, it passed the House of Representatives with a vote of 344 to, I think, 80-something. So that was an overwhelming bipartisan bill that passed the House of Representatives. And what the president sees how, in essence, dependent the American economy is. In fact, space represents an export for the United States, which offsets the trade deficit, as you're aware, that the president is very keen on fixing. And so if we want to be able to protect and preserve this critical piece of the American economy, we have to be prepared. Enemies of the United States.
This is a critical point. If you can defend your satellites, you have an enormous advantage, if not the ultimate advantage, correct?
And yes, absolutely. And our potential adversaries are calling space the American Achilles heel, which, when you think about how dependent we are on space, look, if we don't have banking in this country, as I said, every banking transaction requires a GPS signal for timing. If we lose banking, we don't have milk in the grocery store in a matter of days. That is an existential threat to the United States. The president has seen the same intelligence we saw in the House of Representatives. He's moved very quickly to establish a space force, as we had voted on in the House of Representatives. And with support from the executive branch, I really think that we're going to get this done.
$8 billion over 5 years. I think that's just a starting number, don't you think? I don't know how much it's going to cost in the end. Last comment on that.
So here's the thing. There was a time when the Air Force was part of the Army, and a lot of people said, we don't need a separate Air Force. This was back in the 1940s. We don't need a separate Air Force. It's too expensive, more bureaucracy. Well, my friends, we created the Air Force, and because of it, we've been very effective in theaters of war. And when you think about space, that's where we are now, a new domain where it is critical for Americans to be protected. When I say Americans, I'm talking about Americans on Earth being protected,
no doubt,
because we're so dependent on our space-based activities.
I also thought what the Vice President said about China and Russia, this is a competition now, too, as you well know. I hope you come back. Jim Bridenstine, thank you from NASA for dreaming a little bit today. Thank you, sir. You bet. Julie, what's next?
All right, securing our border. Arrests of people coming into the country illegally up sharply, but the biggest surprise may actually be where the fastest growing group of detainees is coming from. It's not Mexico or South America. Securing our southern border, authorities now saying the fastest group of people detained for entering the country illegally actually come from India. William Lajeunesse is live in our West Coast newsroom with more on this. William.
Well, Julie, a week ago, this agent says, by the way, we're catching a lot of Indians. I go, really? From Mexico? So get this, 4 years ago, 13 Indian nationals were caught crossing into California from Mexico. Today, that's more than 6,000, most in a tiny place called El Centro. Most border agents know Spanish, but in El Centro, California, many immigrants speak only Punjabi.
When trying to communicate, we are going to have to get the interpreter to get the entire story. Agents here apprehend more Indian nationals than any group other than Mexicans.
It's a very common area for Indian nationals to be crossing. Why? Because it's a path of least resistance.
Across the entire U.S.-Mexican border, 2,000 miles, it is this spot where more Indian nationals cross than anywhere else. Why? Well, take a look at the fence from the Mexican side. We're only looking at maybe 5 feet. Don't even need a ladder. Officials say 5 to 10 Indian nationals cross here illegally into the U.S. every day.
This sector alone, 70 miles of border with Mexico, is the lead sector with Indian apprehensions. We have over 3,200 Indian nationals that have been apprehended right here in one particular spot.
How? Agents say the immigrants fly to Qatar, then Ecuador, then travel through Central America up to El Centro.
They know that the border is heavily guarded closer to the ocean. As you get inland, it's easier to cross.
Attorney Judy Wood, who has handled many Indian asylum cases, says women who marry outside their class or caste system fear assault, while Sikh men flee religious and political persecution.
People who are untouchables, the lowest caste, are basically not allowed to participate fully in society.
So the smuggling fee for an Indian national is 25 grand versus, say, 8 grand for a Central American. Most get released, they get on a bus and go live with relatives, Julie, until a judge can hear their asylum claim.
All right, William Lajeunesse, interesting. India, who would have thought? All right, thank you.
There's been a new round of NFL protests from last night, some kneeling, others raising a fist, a few staying inside the locker room. It is preseason game number 1, and the president's firing back about that. Also, Russia upping the ante against the administration, vowing retaliation against the U.S. after a new round of sanctions directed right at Moscow. Congressman Lee Zeldin from the House Foreign Affairs Committee is our guest to react to all that. Coming up, top of the hour. Come on back.